Ambassador Cleet of the Valorian Empire had prepared for this moment his entire career. 3 decades of diplomatic training, 17 languages mastered, and a perfect record of first contact assessments. He stood in the docking bay of humanity's newest space station, his violet skin practically glowing with professional pride, adjusting his ceremonial sash for the 4th time. "This will be flawless," he muttered to his spouse, Mira, who was already eyeing the human architecture with barely concealed amusement. "You said that about the Grexian delegation," Mira reminded him. The Grexians had reasonable biology. They didn't spontaneously combust. Cleet smoothed his sash again. "Humans have passed all preliminary screenings. They're clearly a civilized species. This is a formality." The airlock hissed open, and Commander Jake Torres emerged, wearing what Cleet would later learn was called a dad hoodie, instead of proper military dress. This was the first red flag. The second red flag was the tiny human attached to his leg. "Ambassador Cleet, welcome to Station Unity." Jake extended his hand with a grin that seemed far too relaxed for a formal diplomatic encounter. "Sorry about the casual Friday vibe. And, sorry about Emma. Babysitter canceled. Food poisoning. She'll be fine, though." Cleet stared at the miniature human, who stared back with unnervingly large eyes. "This is your offspring?" "Yep, 3 years old, full of energy, and I promise she'll be on her best behavior." Jake ruffled Emma's hair. "Right, kiddo?" Emma said nothing. She was too busy staring at the ornamental Vespin nightshade in the decorative planter beside the airlock, a plant Cleet specifically requested because its deadly beauty would demonstrate proper safety protocols between species. "Commander Torres, I must advise you that the botanical specimen in that container secretes a contact poison fatal to most sentient species within minutes," Cleet said, already reaching for his datapad. "To document this teachable moment." "Oh, neat," Jake said. Emma had already toddled over to the plant and grabbed a handful of leaves. Cleet's datapad clattered to the floor. Time seemed to slow. His 3 decades of training crystallized into a single moment of pure horror as he watched the human child squeeze the leaves, the toxic oil clearly coating her tiny fingers. And then, because the universe apparently had a sixth sense of humor, she stuck her entire hand in her mouth. "Medic!" Cleet shrieked, lunging forward. "Emergency decontamination. Someone call..." "Emma, honey, what do we say about eating plants we haven't met yet?" Jake's tone suggested he was correcting table manners, not responding to a lethal poisoning. "Zoe, Daddy," Emma said around her fist, then giggled. Cleet waited for the convulsions. The screaming. The rapid cellular breakdown he'd witnessed in laboratory safety videos. Emma pulled her hand out of her mouth, wiped it on her shirt, and toddled off toward the station's main corridor like she hadn't just ingested enough toxin to kill a Valorian warlord. "Is she?" Cleet's voice came out as a wheeze. "Is she going to expire? From Nightshade?" Jake picked up Cleet's datapad and handed it back. "Nah. I mean, we should probably wash her hands before lunch, but she'll be fine." Mira made a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. "That plant is lethal," Cleet insisted, his voice climbing an octave. "To you guys, maybe." Jake shrugged. "Humans have this whole evolved tolerance thing. Our planet's basically trying to kill us constantly, so we got pretty good at not dying. Look, I know this seems weird, but I promise, I've been parenting for 3 years, and Emma's only been to the emergency room twice." "Twice? And one of those was technically my fault. Come on, let me show you to the conference room. Emma, stay where I can see you." Emma was already gone. Cleet looked at Mira, desperately hoping his spouse would confirm that this was as insane as it seemed. Mira simply patted his shoulder. "I like them already. We're going to die here," Cleet whispered. "We're going to die on this station because humans let their offspring consume poison as a casual afternoon activity." From somewhere down the corridor, Emma's voice echoed back. "Daddy, what's this red button do?" "Don't touch that," Jake's voice, finally showing a hint of concern. A loud alarm blared. Emergency lights flickered. "Okay, touching it was fine. We're good," Jake called out cheerfully. Cleet pulled out his assessment forms with trembling hands, staring at the first question. "Do the species demonstrate adequate safety awareness?" He left it blank. This was going to be a very long evaluation. The conference room was, mercifully, child-proofed. Or at least, Cleet assumed it was child-proofed by human standards, which he was rapidly learning meant absolutely nothing by galactic standards. Emma sat in a chair that was comically too large for her, swinging her legs and humming a tune that sounded vaguely threatening. Cleet had positioned himself at the opposite end of the table, maintaining what he considered a safe distance from the tiny chaos engine. So, Jake said, pulling up a holographic display, you wanted to assess our cultural integration capabilities, our safety protocols, and our overall readiness for full galactic citizenship. I've prepared a comprehensive presentation. Daddy, I'm thirsty, Emma announced. Okay, sweetheart, there's a juice box in my bag. Jake didn't even look up from his display. Cleet watched in mounting horror as Emma climbed down from her chair, toddled to Jake's equipment bag, and pulled out a bottle that was very clearly labeled with the universal symbol for industrial cleaning solution. That is corrosive solvent. Cleet vaulted over the table with surprising agility for a Valorian. Emma had already unscrewed the cap and taken a drink. Huh? Jake glanced over. Oh, no. That's just watered-down sports drink. Emma likes to put stickers on everything. That's probably from the bottle she decorated last week. Cleet, now sprawled across the conference table, slowly processed this information. So that is not the industrial solvent used for cleaning plasma conduits? I mean, the bottle used to have that stuff in it, but I washed it out. Jake looked genuinely confused by Cleet's concern. We're not monsters. You reuse containers labeled with hazard symbols? Mira was openly laughing now, her shoulders shaking as she tried to maintain diplomatic composure. Look, Ambassador, Jake said patiently. I know we do things differently, but I promise Emma's fine. She's a tough kid. Last month she fell down a whole flight of stairs and just asked for a cookie after. That is not reassuring, Cleet said from his position on the table. That is the opposite of reassuring. Emma, having finished her definitely not poison drink, wandered toward a ventilation grate. Daddy, there's a funny noise in the wall. That's just the air system, honey. Leave it alone. She didn't leave it alone. Of course she didn't. Cleet was beginning to understand that telling a human child to leave something alone was functionally identical to issuing an engraved invitation to investigate. Emma pulled at the grate, which popped off with surprising ease. Something small and purple scuttled out. Cleet felt his 3 hearts collectively stop beating. Is that, he whispered, is that a skitterer? The creature in question was indeed a skitterer, a highly aggressive specimen from Sector 9 that the station's xenobiology team had been trying to contain for 3 weeks. It had killed 2 handlers, injured 4 more, and was considered so dangerous that the leading experts recommended spacing it. Emma picked it up. Emma. No. Jake finally showed real alarm. The skitterer, which had literally mauled a trained xenobiologist yesterday, made a sound that Cleet's translator interpreted as confused purring and nestled into Emma's palm. Daddy, can I keep him? He's soft. The skitterer, apparently in agreement with this assessment, curled into a ball and fell asleep. Okay, that's actually weird, Jake admitted. Those things are supposed to be hyper-aggressive. It tried to remove Dr. Patel's arm yesterday, Cleet said faintly, with malice. Mr. Fuzzy likes me, Emma declared, as if this settled the matter. Sweetheart, Mr. Fuzzy is a dangerous alien that… Okay, apparently he does like you. Jake rubbed his face. Ambassador, I know this looks bad. Looks bad? Looks bad? Cleet was pretty sure he was having a cardiac event. Your offspring has befriended a creature that security specialists wanted to eject into space. In my defense, I didn't know the vent was connected to the containment area. Jake picked up his tablet. I'm sending a message to xenobiology. They're going to want to study this. Emma was now sitting cross-legged on the floor, letting the supposedly deadly skitterer crawl up and down her arms. The creature seemed delighted. How? Cleet managed. How is she not injured? I mean, she's sitting still and being gentle? Animals usually respond well to that. Jake paused. Well, Earth animals usually respond well to that. Apparently alien death monsters do too. Mira had given up all pretense of diplomatic decorum and was taking photos on her communication device. Your species achieved space travel, Cleet said slowly, while living on a planet where you had to develop immunity to poison and the ability to domesticate anything that doesn't immediately kill you. When you put it like that, it sounds impressive, Jake said. Mostly we just call it Tuesday. Emma looked up at Cleet with those unnervingly innocent eyes. Do you want a pet, Mr. Fuzzy? I absolutely do not. He's really soft. The skitterer looked at Cleet. Cleet looked at the skitterer. Somewhere in that exchange, Cleet realized he was the one who felt threatened, not the 3-year-old currently using a bioweapon as a stuffed animal. He pulled out his assessment forms again. Question 2. Do the species demonstrate appropriate risk evaluation? He stared at it for a long moment, then wrote, inappropriate by our standards, somehow functional by theirs. Daddy, I'm hungry. Emma announced. Cleet braced himself for whatever horror was coming next. The tour of Station Unity had been going surprisingly well for approximately 4 minutes, which Cleet was learning was the maximum amount of time humans could maintain normalcy before chaos intervened. Jake was explaining the station's advanced life support systems, gesturing at a wall panel displaying atmospheric composition data, when Emma disappeared. Not in a gradual, "oh, she wandered off" way, but in a, "she was here and now she's not" way that made Cleet's primary heart seize up. "Commander Torres," Cleet said with forced calm, "where is your offspring?" Jake glanced down at the empty space where Emma had been standing 3 seconds ago. "Huh, Emma? Emma, where'd you go, kiddo?" A distant giggle echoed from somewhere down a side corridor. "That sounded like it came from the direction of the restricted labs," Mira observed, unhelpfully. Jake's expression shifted from relaxed to mildly concerned, which Cleet was learning was the human equivalent of total panic. "Okay, that's not ideal. The xenobiology lab is that way." "The what lab?" Cleet was already running. They found Emma 30 seconds later, which was 29 seconds too late. She'd somehow bypassed a biometric lock, a keycard scanner, and a physical deadbolt to gain entry to the station's most secure laboratory. Cleet would later learn she'd accomplished this by following a research assistant through the door and hiding behind a supply cart, but in the moment, all he could process was the scene before him. Emma stood on a counter, her small hands buried in a containment vessel labeled, "Extreme Biohazard. Do not open under any circumstances." "Hi, Daddy." She waved with hands covered in something that glowed faintly purple. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the station's head xenobiologist, stood frozen in the corner, holding a tablet and making a sound like a tea kettle reaching maximum pressure. She just... I turned around for 1 second. "What is she touching?" Cleet's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Varelian slime mold, Doctor," Tanaka said, her voice climbing to a frequency that might summon dogs. "It's an aggressive parasitic organism that bonds with host tissue on contact and begins cellular conversion within 90 seconds. We've been studying it through triple-sealed containment because it killed an entire research colony on Varelia Prime. She's been touching it for at least 45 seconds. Cleet did the math. That meant Emma had approximately 45 seconds before the organism began consuming her from the inside out. He'd seen the documentation videos. They were not pleasant. "Emma, honey, very slowly, very carefully, pull your hands out of that container," Jake said, his voice tight. "But Daddy, it's squishy, like Play-Doh." "I know, sweetheart, but we need to wash your hands right now." Emma pulled her hands free, and Cleet watched in absolute horror as the purple slime clung to her fingers, pulsing with what the research documentation had described as aggressive bonding behavior. This was it. This was how a diplomatic mission ended, watching a human child dissolve because their parent brought them to a space station. 90 seconds passed. Emma wiggled her fingers, watching the slime drip back into the container. "It tickles." 2 minutes. "Dr. Tanaka," Jake said carefully, "is she supposed to still be intact?" "No, Doctor." Tanaka had moved from tea kettle sounds to just staring with her mouth open. "She should be. The cellular conversion should have. Why isn't she screaming?" Emma wiped her hands on her shirt, leaving purple streaks across the fabric. "Can I have a snack now?" 3 minutes. Cleet watched as the slime mold on Emma's shirt began to lose its glow, turning from aggressive purple to a dull gray. It flaked off like dried paint. Dr. Tanaka moved closer, her scientific curiosity apparently overriding her survival instinct. Did her immune system just kill the slime mold? "Emma's had all her shots," Jake offered weakly. "Shots? This thing dissolved a Varelian scientist in under 4 minutes. Their biology is carbon-based, just like humans. There's no reason she should." Dr. Tanaka grabbed a scanner and waved it over Emma's hands. Her cellular structure is completely unchanged. If anything, her white blood cell count is slightly elevated, like her body just dealt with a minor infection. A minor infection. Emma had already lost interest in the conversation and was exploring the lab with the determination of a very small, very unstoppable force of nature. She stopped at a large containment tank, pressing her face against the transparent aluminum. "Daddy, what's that?" Cleet looked. His blood turned to ice water. Inside the tank was a Vreethian spine ripper, an apex predator from a death world that made Earth look like a vacation resort. It was 12 feet of scales, teeth, and murderous intent. The station had acquired it for behavioral studies after it had killed its previous 3 handlers. There were 17 locks on the tank. 17. Emma tapped on the glass. "Hi, Mr. Dragon." The spine ripper, which had been sleeping in a corner, opened one enormous yellow eye. "Emma, step away from the tank," Jake said, and this time there was real command in his voice. The creature moved toward the glass with fluid, predatory grace. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of teeth designed to shred titanium plating. It pressed its face against the glass, directly opposite Emma's tiny hand. Cleet prepared to witness the most traumatic event of his diplomatic career. The spine ripper made a sound. Cleet's translator buffer crashed trying to process it, but it sounded remarkably like a purr. The creature's aggressive posture softened. It tilted its head, following Emma's hand as she moved it across the glass. "He's pretty," Emma said. "That thing, Doctor," Tanaka said slowly, "responds to all human personnel with extreme aggression. It tried to break containment yesterday when Jenkins walked by. We've been considering putting it down because it's too dangerous to study. Emma has a way with animals," Jake said, and Cleet detected the first hint of actual confusion in the commander's voice. "But this is weird even for her." Emma had moved on again, because of course she had. She was now standing on a step stool, reaching for a bright red container on a high shelf. "Emma, no!" 3 voices shouted in unison. She grabbed it anyway. The container was clearly labeled in 17 languages, including English, crystallized neutronium, catalyst, toxic to all known biology, lethal in microscopic doses. Emma twisted the lid, which should have required security clearance and a mechanical wrench to open. "How is she opening that?" Dr. Tanaka lunged forward, but she was too far away. Emma peered inside the container. "Ooh, sparkly." She reached in and pulled out a handful of crystalline powder that sparkled like malevolent glitter. Cleet's translator helpfully informed him that he was speaking in his native language now, a string of words that roughly translated to increasingly creative descriptions of disaster and divine abandonment. Emma brought the powder up to her face. Time slowed. Cleet saw his entire diplomatic career flash before his eyes, ending with him trying to explain to the Valorian High Council how he'd let a human toddler poison herself in 7 different ways in under 15 minutes. She sneezed. The powder puffed into a small cloud around her face. She blinked, wiped her nose with her non-glittery hand, and carefully poured the powder back into the container. "That made my nose itchy," she declared. Dr. Tanaka had given up standing and was now sitting on the floor, her tablet forgotten. That should have stopped her heart instantly. Her lungs should have crystallized. Her blood should have... She looked up at Jake. "What are you people?" "Persistent," Jake offered. He walked over and picked up Emma, who still had sparkly death powder on her hands. "Okay, kiddo, we're gonna wash your hands now, and then we're gonna have a talk about touching things in labs." "But they were so cool, Daddy." "I know, sweetheart, but not everything cool is safe to touch." Cleet found his voice, though it came out several octaves higher than normal. "Commander Torres, your species, your child, just survived exposure to 3 separate Class Omega biohazards in under 10 minutes. She befriended a creature that we classify as unreformably hostile. She consumed matter that should have killed her on contact. And your response is to wash her hands?" Jake looked genuinely puzzled. "I mean, yeah, what else would I do? She's fine. Kids are resilient." "Resilient? Your offspring just survived what would be classified as an extinction-level event for most species." "It's Tuesday," Jake said again, like that explained anything. Emma waved at the spine ripper as they left the lab. The creature watched her go with what Cleet could only describe as longing. Cleet stood in the lab, surrounded by violated containment protocols and impossible biology, and pulled out his assessment forms. Question 3. Does the species understand the concept of mortality? He stared at it for a long moment, then wrote, "They understand it. They just don't care." Mira appeared beside him, still taking photos. "I'm starting to understand why humans call their children bundles of joy. They survive things that would kill us and consider it recreational activity." "This isn't joy, Mira. This is madness." "Perhaps," his spouse said thoughtfully. "It's both." Dr. Tanaka was still sitting on the floor, muttering about cellular biology and impossible immune responses. The spine ripper pressed against its tank, still staring at the door Emma had left through. Cleet had a terrible thought. If human children were this indestructible, what were human adults capable of? He didn't want to know. He absolutely was going to find out. Cleet found himself in the station's database archive at 2 in the morning, station time, because sleep was apparently no longer something his body could do. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emma's tiny hands covered in substances that should have melted her DNA. The computer terminal glowed softly in the darkness as he pulled up file after file on human biology, human history, human anything that might explain what he'd witnessed. Mira found him 3 hours later, surrounded by holographic displays showing information that grew progressively more. Disturbing. You missed dinner, she said, setting down a container of Valorian nutrient paste. Mira, look at this. Cleet gestured frantically at a display. Earth, the human homeworld, has an atmospheric oxygen content of 21%. That seems reasonable. It's corrosive. Oxygen is a poisonous, highly reactive element. They breathe it, constantly, and their cells use it to generate energy through a process that would be classified as controlled combustion in any sane biology. Mira sat down, studying the displays. Go on. Their planet has produced and survived 5 separate extinction-level events. 5. Most species get 1, maybe 2 if they're unlucky, before the universe wipes the slate clean. Humans evolved after their planet tried to kill everything with ice, fire, asteroids, volcanoes, and their own atmosphere turning toxic. Cleet pulled up another file. And look at this, they're plants. The things they consider safe. Edible plants contain compounds that are literally defense mechanisms meant to kill herbivores. The nightshade from the docking bay? That's just the beginning. They eat peppers that trigger their pain receptors as a recreational activity. They consume ethanol, a solvent, for fun. They keep animals as companions that still retain the ability to kill them. Cleet was pacing now, his 3 hearts racing at different speeds. Their planet has weather systems powerful enough to level cities, tectonic activity that regularly reshapes continents, and microscopic organisms that wage constant warfare against their immune systems. Mira scrolled through the data, her expression shifting from amused to concerned to something approaching awe. This says their gravity is almost twice standard galactic baseline. Exactly. They evolved under conditions that would crush most species, breathing a toxic atmosphere, eating poison, fighting off parasites that evolved to kill them specifically, and dealing with megafauna that considered them food. Cleet pulled up an image of something called a bear. Look at this. They shared their continents with these for thousands of years. That's horrifying. They thought it was cute. They make toys shaped like them for their children. Cleet collapsed into a chair. Mira, I've been operating under a fundamental misunderstanding. I thought Jake was a negligent parent. I thought Emma surviving today was luck or anomaly. And now? Now I understand that Emma's behavior isn't despite her biology, it's because of it. Human children are literally designed to learn through trial and error, to test boundaries, to push limits, because on their planet, that's how you discover what will kill you versus what just might kill you. Cleet pulled up another file, this one showing human evolutionary history. Look at their development. Human infants are born essentially helpless, a rarity in nature. They spend years in a vulnerable state, learning through constant exploration and experimentation. Most species keep their young safe during that period. Yes, but humans can't keep them completely safe, because their entire planet is a death trap. So instead, they evolved this insane strategy. Make the children curious enough to explore, resilient enough to survive the exploration, and adaptable enough to learn from it. Cleet was gesticulating wildly now. Emma wasn't being reckless today. She was doing exactly what millions of years of evolution designed her to do, test her environment to understand it. Mira pulled up a file on human medical history. It says here they regularly survived injuries that would be fatal to us. Broken bones, lacerations, infections, and they just healed. Their bodies repair themselves from damage that would require complete cellular regeneration for a Valorian. Because they had to. Their planet didn't give them the luxury of dying from minor injuries. Cleet pointed at a chart showing human immune response. They're immune. Systems are like military installations, constantly on high alert, cataloging threats, developing countermeasures. That Varelian slime mold didn't stand a chance against billions of years of evolutionary warfare. What about the spine ripper? Cleet pulled up behavioral studies. Humans domesticated wolves. Wolves. Apex predators with pack-hunting strategies and jaws that could crush bones. They looked at these creatures and thought, I could be friends with that. And they were right. He scrolled frantically. They've domesticated dozens of species over their history. They have an instinctive understanding of predator behavior because they spent millennia being both predator and prey. So Emma's ability to calm the spine ripper isn't magic, it's just human. She understood, on some instinctive level, how to approach a predator without triggering its attack response. Her species has been doing it for thousands of years. Cleet pulled up another file, this one on human space. Exploration. And look at this, their journey to space. Most species develop slow, careful, methodical approaches to leaving their planet. Humans strap themselves to controlled explosions and just went. Their early space programs had death rates that would have ended any other species' attempt to reach orbit. But they kept trying. Because they're used to high mortality rates, their entire evolutionary history is a story of survival against impossible odds. Cleet stood up, pacing again. They achieved space travel not despite their death world origins, but because of them. They're problem solvers who don't accept impossible as an answer because their entire existence is statistically impossible. Mira was quiet for a long moment, processing the data. So when Jake said, "It's Tuesday," he meant that Emma's behavior today, the poison exposure, the deadly animals, the toxic materials, that was just a normal day for a human child, not even a particularly dangerous one by their standards. Cleet pulled up a file labeled Common Childhood Injuries and immediately regretted it. Mira, they have an entire medical field dedicated to fixing children who break themselves through exploration. It's expected. That's actually quite brilliant, in a terrifying way. It's insane. It's beautiful. It's completely contrary to every principle of safe child rearing in the galaxy. Cleet slumped back into his chair. I've been evaluating them by Valorian standards, by normal standards, but there's nothing normal about humans. They're a species of survivors who looked at a universe trying to kill them and decided to make friends with it instead. Mira stood, placing a hand on Cleet's shoulder. So what does this mean for your assessment? Cleet stared at the displays, at the mountains of evidence showing humanity's impossible journey from death world prey to spacefaring civilization. It means I've been asking the wrong questions. I've been trying to determine if humans are safe enough for galactic society, when I should have been asking if galactic society is ready for humans. And your answer? Absolutely not. Cleet managed a weak laugh. But I don't think that should stop us from integrating them. Mira, think about what they could contribute. A species that sees obstacles as challenges, that treats the impossible as merely difficult, that survives through adaptation and innovation rather than avoiding risk entirely. They'd revolutionize everything they touched, or destroy it, or both simultaneously. Cleet pulled up his assessment forms, still mostly blank. They're dangerous, Mira. Not because they're aggressive or warlike, but because they fundamentally don't understand the concept of too dangerous to attempt. They're going to push boundaries we didn't know existed, survive things that should kill them, and befriend creatures that want to eat them. And you're going to recommend integration? Cleet thought about Emma, happily, playing with substances that could end civilizations, completely unaware that she was supposed to be dead 7 times over. He thought about Jake's calm acceptance of his daughter's chaos, the practiced ease of a species that had learned to coexist with constant danger. Yes, he said finally, with warnings. Many, many warnings. Such as, never, under any circumstances, volunteer to babysit their children. Mira laughed, and Cleet found himself laughing too, the hysteria of the day finally breaking through his diplomatic composure. Somewhere on this station, Emma was probably sleeping peacefully, dreaming innocent dreams, completely unaware that she'd given an experienced diplomat an existential crisis. Humans didn't just survive on a death world, they thrived on it. And now they were bringing that resilience to the stars. The galaxy, Cleet realized, was about to get very interesting, or very dead. Possibly both, definitely both. Morning came too quickly. Cleet had managed. Approximately 40 minutes of sleep, interrupted by nightmares featuring Emma riding the spine ripper through the station while eating crystallized poison like candy. He found Jake in the station's command center, looking remarkably refreshed for someone whose child had violated every safety protocol in the galaxy yesterday. Emma sat nearby, coloring with what Cleet desperately hoped were normal crayons, and not some sort of toxic industrial marker. Ambassador, sleep well? Jake's cheerfulness was almost offensive. No. Cleet set down his tablet with more force than necessary. Commander Torres, I need to file my preliminary assessment, and I've encountered a problem. What kind of problem? Cleet pulled up his notes. Every observation I documented yesterday reads like a report on a containment failure. Subject consumed Class A poison. Subject befriended hostile xenofauna. Subject handled materials rated as lethal to all known biology. My superiors are going to think I suffered a psychological breakdown. Jake leaned over to look at the screen. Okay, yeah, when you write it like that, it sounds bad. Because it is bad. Mr. Cleet has a loud voice, Emma observed, not looking up from her coloring. Sorry, kiddo. Cleet lowered his volume with effort. Commander, how am I supposed to assess your species' readiness for galactic integration when my notes read like a disaster report? Well, what are the actual questions on your assessment? Cleet scrolled through the form. Safety protocols, risk assessment, cultural compatibility, technological responsibility, diplomatic temperament, and overall threat evaluation. Okay, and what did you observe? I observed your offspring systematically violating every safety protocol while you watched with mild interest. Jake considered this. Counterpoint. Did anything actually go wrong? Cleet opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. She consumed poison. But did she die? No. But did she get injured? No. Did she injure anyone else? The spine ripper seemed emotionally devastated when she left. But physically injured? Jake pressed. Cleet slumped. No. So from a purely factual standpoint, Emma explored her environment, interacted with various materials and organisms, and concluded the day in perfect health with no casualties. Jake smiled. Sounds like successful risk assessment to me. That's not you can't just. Cleet grabbed his tablet. Fine. Let's go through this systematically. Safety protocols. How do humans handle dangerous situations? We assess the actual danger versus perceived danger, then proceed with appropriate caution. Emma put her hands in Varelian's slime mold, which, as it turned out, wasn't dangerous to her. Jake pulled up a file on his own tablet. Dr. Tanaka sent me her analysis this morning. Turns out human immune systems treat the slime mold as a common bacterial infection. It's not that Emma was being unsafe, it's that your danger ratings don't account for human biology. Cleet wanted to argue, but the logic was sound. Fine. Risk assessment. How do humans evaluate risk? We consider probability of harm, severity of potential harm, and likelihood of survival if harm occurs. Jake gestured at Emma. Kids specifically are designed to test boundaries because that's how they learn what's actually dangerous versus what adults are just worried about. Most species teach children through instruction, not experimentation. Sure, but humans are really good at surviving experiments gone wrong. It's kind of our thing. Jake pulled up another file. Look at our history. Every major human advancement came from someone trying something everyone else thought was too dangerous. Controlled fire, ocean navigation, powered flight, space travel. We're a species of, let's find out. Emma held up her drawing. It showed stick figures labeled M and MR fuzzy, surrounded by hearts. The skitterer was purple and had far too many teeth, but it was smiling. That's beautiful, sweetheart, Jake said. Cleet stared at the drawing, then at his assessment form. Cultural compatibility. Do humans respect other species' boundaries and customs? Absolutely. We're very interested in learning from other cultures. Emma violated containment protocols in a secure lab. Okay, yes, but in her defense, she's 3. Adult humans are much better at following rules. Jake paused. Most of the time. Generally. We try, at least. That's not inspiring confidence, Commander. Look, Ambassador, I'm not going to pretend humans are perfect. We're curious. We push boundaries. And we sometimes break things we're trying to understand. Jake's expression became more serious. But we also adapt quickly, we learn from mistakes, and we genuinely want to be part of the galactic community. We're just coming at it from a different baseline than most species. Cleet pulled up the next question. Technological responsibility. Can humans be trusted with advanced technology? We built a space station with life support systems that accommodate 17 different species' environmental needs, including yours. We've maintained it for 2 years with 0 catastrophic failures. Jake gestured around the command center. Our safety record is actually pretty good when you account for the fact that we're still learning. Emma opened a container that required security clearance and mechanical assistance. Okay, that's on us. We didn't expect a 3-year-old to defeat biometric locks. We'll update our security protocols. Jake made a note on his tablet. See? Adapting. Emma had left her coloring and was now standing at a window, watching a supply ship dock. Daddy, why is that ship so shiny? Because it's new, honey. The metal hasn't oxidized yet. What's oxidized? It's when oxygen reacts with metal and makes it change color. Oh, like when my bike got rusty? Exactly like that. Cleet watched this exchange, processing the casual way Jake explained complex chemistry to a toddler. You educate your children early. Kids ask questions. We answer them as honestly as we can. Jake smiled at Emma. She won't remember most of it, but it builds curiosity and critical thinking. By exposing them to danger, by exposing them to the universe, and teaching them how to navigate it. Jake looked at Cleet directly. Ambassador, I know yesterday was overwhelming. I know Emma seems reckless by your standards. But here's the thing. Human children have been learning this way for hundreds of thousands of years. We're still here. We're thriving. We made it to space using this exact approach. Cleet looked at his assessment form, at all the questions designed for species that evolved on safe, stable worlds with predictable dangers. Your species doesn't fit the evaluation criteria. Then maybe the criteria needs updating. That's not how diplomacy works. Commander, maybe it should be. Jake leaned back in his chair. Look, you can file a report saying humans are too dangerous, too reckless, too unpredictable for integration. Your superiors might even agree. But we're already here. We're already part of the conversation. And we're not going away. You can either work with us, weird biology and all, or spend the next century trying to make us fit into boxes we were never designed for. Emma returned to the table, climbing into her father's lap. Daddy, can Mr. Cleet come to my birthday party next month? That's up to him, sweetheart. Please? Emma looked at Cleet with those enormous eyes. We're having cake and games and everything. Cleet thought about the potential hazards of a human child's birthday celebration. Projectile food items, sugary substances causing hyperactivity, games that probably involved some level of risk he wasn't prepared for. He also thought about Emma's genuine smile, Jake's patient explanations, the spine ripper's unexpected gentleness, and the fact that humans had survived their own planet through nothing but determination and adaptability. I'll consult my schedule, he said carefully. Emma beamed. Yay. Cleet pulled up a fresh section of his assessment form and began typing. Not the answers the form expected, but the answers that were true. Safety protocols. Human definitions of safe differ from galactic baseline due to biological resilience. However, actual injury rates remain low. Protocols functional within human context. Risk assessment. Humans evaluate risk based on survivability rather than avoidance. Unconventional but effective given species durability. Cultural compatibility. High curiosity leads to boundary testing, but genuine interest in learning and adaptation demonstrated. Technological responsibility. Strong safety record with complex systems. Security protocols may need updating for human cognitive capabilities. Diplomatic temperament. Friendly, open, willing to engage. Unconventional methods, but positive. Intentions. Overall, threat evaluation. Humans pose minimal direct threat. Primary concern is their tendency to attempt impossible tasks and frequently succeed, which may disrupt established galactic understanding of limitations. He paused at the final section. Recommendation for integration. Mira appeared in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee, Earth's preferred stimulant beverage that was mildly toxic to Valorians. Have you made your decision? Cleet looked at Jake, who was helping Emma color a second drawing. He looked at the station around them, functioning smoothly despite being operated by a species that considered oxygen a nutrient. He looked at his assessment, full of observations that would have seemed impossible a week ago. Yes, he said, I have. The holographic transmission to the Valorian High Council was scheduled for precisely 1400 hours. Cleet stood in the station's main conference room, his formal diplomatic robes immaculate, his 3 hearts, beating in synchronized nervous patterns. Behind him, the station's windows showed Earth hanging in space like a blue and white marble, deceptively peaceful. The council materialized before him, 7 stern faces representing the most powerful diplomatic body in the known galaxy. High Chancellor Vexen spoke first, her voice carrying the weight of 4 centuries of experience. Ambassador Cleet, we have reviewed your preliminary notes with considerable concern. Your observations suggest highly irregular behavior and multiple safety violations. Before we proceed, please confirm. Are you currently under duress or experiencing psychological distress? No, Chancellor. I am quite sane, despite evidence to the contrary. Then please explain. Counselor Mortek interjected, how a species' offspring survived exposure to 3 separate Class Omega biohazards in a single afternoon. Cleet took a breath. Because, Counselor, humans are not like us. They did not evolve on a peaceful world with stable ecosystems and predictable dangers. They evolved on a planet actively trying to kill them, and they survived by becoming unkillable. The council members exchanged glances. That's hyperbole, surely, Chancellor Vexen said. I wish it were. Cleet pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's atmospheric composition, geological activity, and biodiversity. Observe. Oxygen content 21%, which they breathe constantly despite its corrosive properties. 5 mass extinction events survived. Predators that outweighed them by orders of magnitude. Diseases that specifically evolved to kill them. Weather systems that could level cities. And they not only survived all of this, they thrived. Counselor Dravix leaned forward, Your report mentions a human child befriending a Vreethian spine ripper. Yes, those creatures are classified as unreformably hostile. To us, yes. To humans? Cleet pulled up footage Dr. Tanaka had captured, showing Emma standing before the containment tank while the spine ripper pressed against the glass, purring. They domesticate predators for companionship. It's what they do. They've been doing it for millennia. This is deeply concerning, Mortek said. A species that doesn't recognize danger. They recognize danger perfectly well, Counselor. They simply have a different threshold for what constitutes actual danger versus theoretical danger. Cleet pulled up his complete assessment. I've spent 3 days observing human behavior, studying their history, and consulting their databases. My conclusion is this. Humans are not reckless. They are optimized for survival in conditions that would kill any of us within hours. And you believe this makes them suitable for galactic integration? Chancellor Vexen's tone was skeptical. I believe this makes them essential for galactic integration. Silence fell across the council chamber. Explain, Vexen commanded. Cleet organized his thoughts. This was it. The moment. His entire career had prepared him for. The galaxy has been stable for 3,000 years. We've achieved this through careful protocols, risk avoidance, and maintaining established boundaries. We don't attempt things that might fail. We don't explore systems that might be dangerous. We don't push limits because pushing limits is how species go extinct. As it should be, Mortek said. Except we've stopped growing. Cleet pulled up galactic expansion charts. Our territory hasn't expanded in 800 years. Our technology advances incrementally because revolutionary changes are too risky. We've achieved stability by sacrificing innovation. And humans would change this how? Dravix asked. Because humans don't know how to stop pushing forward. They look at impossible problems and think interesting challenge. They survived by adapting, innovating, trying things no sane species would attempt. Cleet pulled up human technological history. They went from primitive tools to spaceflight in 10,000 years. That's a fraction of the time it took any galactic species. They did it by failing constantly and learning from every failure. That sounds chaotic, Vexen observed. It is chaotic. It's also brilliant. Cleet pulled up his final recommendation. Humans will push boundaries we didn't know existed. They'll attempt solutions we'd never consider. They'll survive situations we'd classify as unsurvivable. And yes, they'll occasionally break things, violate protocols, and give diplomats like me existential crises. But they'll also revolutionize everything they touch. You're recommending full integration despite these concerns? Mortek looked incredulous. I'm recommending integration because of these concerns. The galaxy needs humans precisely because they're different from us. Cleet thought of Emma, fearlessly exploring her universe. We've become risk-averse to the point of stagnation. Humans are risk-tolerant to the point of insanity. Together, we might achieve something neither could accomplish alone. The council deliberated in silence, their expressions unreadable. Chancellor Vexen finally spoke. What safeguards do you propose? Extensive cultural exchange programs, joint research initiatives, collaborative exploration missions where human risk tolerance is balanced by our caution. Cleet pulled up his detailed proposal. And absolutely, under no circumstances, should any non-human personnel volunteer to babysit human children without extensive training and psychological preparation. Dravix made a sound that might have been a laugh. You seem quite adamant about that last point. I've earned my adamance, Counselor. Ambassador Cleet, Vexen said slowly. You're asking us to integrate a species that considers poison a minor inconvenience, befriends apex predators, and sends their offspring to explore dangerous environments as standard childhood development. Yes, Chancellor, and you believe this is wise? Cleet thought about his answer carefully. Wise? Perhaps not. Necessary? Absolutely. Safe? Never. But the most important things rarely are. The council members conferred privately, their voices muted. Cleet stood waiting, watching Earth rotate slowly in the view screen. Somewhere down there, billions of humans were going about their day, completely unaware that their entry into galactic society hung in balance. The conference room door opened. Jake walked in, Emma holding his hand, both looking confused. Sorry, Ambassador, Jake whispered. Emma wanted to give you something before your call finished. Emma held up a drawing. It showed 2 stick figures holding hands, one labeled M.E. and one labeled M.R. Cleet. Both were smiling. Above them, she'd written in careful letters, Friends. She'd spelled it wrong. Cleet found he didn't care. Thank you, Emma, he said quietly. I'll treasure this. The council's voices returned. Ambassador Cleet, we have reached a decision, Vexen announced. Your assessment is highly irregular and your recommendations are unprecedented. However, your logic is sound and your observations are thorough. We hereby approve preliminary integration protocols for humanity, with the understanding that this will be closely monitored and subject to ongoing evaluation. Cleet felt something release in his chest. Relief, pride, terror, all three simultaneously. However, Mortek added, we are adding a mandatory advisory to all diplomatic personnel assigned to human relations. Warning, human definitions of safety, risk, and acceptable childhood behavior differ significantly from galactic norms. Proceed with caution and maintain access to emergency psychological services. A wise addition, Counselor. One final question, Ambassador, Vexen said. You spent 3 days in close proximity to humans, including extended exposure to a human child. Given the opportunity, would you accept a permanent posting to human relations? Cleet looked at Emma, who waved enthusiastically. He looked at Jake, who smiled encouragingly. He looked at his assessment, at 3 days of chaos and impossibility that had somehow become the most fascinating assignment of his career. Yes, Chancellor, I believe I would. Then consider it done. You are hereby appointed as the Valorian High Council's permanent liaison to humanity. Try not to let their children poison you. I'll do my best, Chancellor. The transmission ended. Cleet stood in silence, processing what had just happened. He'd done it. Humanity was approved for integration. He was now permanently assigned to the most unpredictable, resilient, chaotic species in the galaxy. So, Jake said, breaking the silence, that sounded like it went well? Your species is officially welcomed into galactic society, Commander. Hey, that's great. We should celebrate. Jake paused. Fair warning. Human celebrations usually involve loud music, excessive food, and activities that are probably mildly concerning by your standards. At this point, Commander, I'd be disappointed if they didn't. Emma tugged on Cleet's robe. Does this mean you'll come to my birthday party? Cleet looked down at the small human who'd survived more deadly encounters in one afternoon than most species experienced in a lifetime. The child who'd given a spine ripper an emotional support session. The tiny chaos engine who'd somehow befriended him despite his initial terror. Yes, Emma. I'll come to your birthday party. Yay. We're having cake and pin the tail on the donkey and I don't know what those things are and I'm certain I'll regret learning. You'll love it, Jake assured him, in a tone that guaranteed Cleet would not, in fact, love it. Mira appeared in the doorway, having monitored the transmission from outside. Congratulations, Ambassador. You've just tied your career to the most unpredictable variable in the galaxy. I'm aware. How does it feel? Cleet looked at Emma's drawing at the 2 stick figures holding hands under a crooked sun. He thought about the galaxy, stable and stagnant, about to be disrupted by a species that didn't know when to quit. He thought about his assessment, filed and approved, opening the door to centuries of chaos and innovation. Terrifying, he said honestly. Absolutely terrifying. But, Mira prompted. But I think the galaxy needed terrifying. We've been playing it safe for too long. Cleet carefully folded Emma's drawing and placed it in his diplomatic files, where it would be preserved in the official record forever. Humans are going to push us, challenge us, and probably give every diplomat in the galaxy at least one psychological crisis. And that's a good thing? That's a necessary thing. Cleet smiled despite himself. Besides, someone needs to update the galactic safety ratings to account for human biology. Might as well be me. Emma had already moved on, investigating a plant in the corner of the conference room. It was, thankfully, native to Earth and therefore actually safe for her to touch. Probably, Jake didn't even look concerned. Cleet was learning. The galaxy, he realized, was about to learn too. Welcome to galactic society, humanity, he murmured. Thanks. Emma called back cheerfully, having somehow heard him across the room. Can we go see Mr. Fuzzy now? The skitterer is in secure containment, sweetheart. But he misses me. How do you know that? I just know. She probably did, Cleet thought. Humans had a way of just knowing impossible things. It was going to be a very interesting few centuries. He couldn't wait. Actually, that was a lie. He could definitely wait. He'd like several years to prepare, possibly decades, maybe a nice peaceful century before. Mr. Cleet, do you want to see my rock collection? I found them outside, and Daddy says some of them are meteorites, before the chaos truly began. Too late for that now. I would love to see your rock collection, Emma. Mira laughed. Jake grinned. Emma bounced with excitement. Somewhere in secure containment, a spine ripper purred. The galaxy would never be the same. And honestly, that was probably for the best.